This is a beautiful, historic brick building in the center of downtown. And it is defaced with this graffiti. It's a white brick building that has been defaced with this.
Unfortunately, we are obscuring some of the most defacing part of it at the moment, the way where our screen is. But on the left, you could, it seems a little subtle to me looking at this. When you're there looking at the building, it's so obviously defaced. And, the only positive sense I have is like, well, that took some tenacity. Like, how did they even do that?
It did. It's impressive.
It's been up there for a long time.
Well, it hasn't even been up.
They have cleaned it and it's been redone. They clean
it and it goes back, and they clean it and it goes back. And this is part of the problem, is that civilization depends on you being able to drive up the costs of those who are violating its rules. That's what the laws are for. And we are now making excuses for lawbreakers, right? Well, maybe the graffiti artist is trying to say something and maybe they don't have an opportunity to do it. And so maybe they can go deface this important part of Portland and that's their right, and then we'll clean it up. And in fact, we will come back to this pattern. But it is the excuse making for people who are not living up to our collective agreement with each other that is actually driving Portland to the brink of failure.
No, that's right. And that's what's happening in all the Western cities. And frankly, I think, increasingly all the American cities, but especially all the West Coast cities. And go on.
Well, I just want to point out that there's a loophole in that, which will be discovered. It will be rediscovered because it always is. And the loophole is a city that does not do anything to solve the problems that ultimately cause that wave of malcontent, a city that just simply turns brutal, right, that arbitrarily punishes people who have fallen on hard times, will drive them out to other cities that don't do that. And that city will become marvelous because it doesn't have those problems as a result of its brutality. So the point is, some city is about to become brutal, and in so doing, reap the benefit of every other city making excuses.
Well, I feel like this is maybe the wrong point to make with this particular image. I was going to say, at one level, this is a purely aesthetic violation, right? I do think that Portland is a beautiful city from almost many of the vantage points, although east of the river, there are many fewer of them increasingly because you have these just endless homeless encampments, some of which are in tents, some of which are in vehicles, and just, destruction all over the place. This is in downtown, just west of the Willamette. And as I said, it's purely aesthetic, and there's a hell of a lot going on in the city. The murder rate is up. The illegal street racing, wrong way on streets, like the not responding to 911. There's a lot wrong with the city that is actually putting life and limb in danger. And this is merely aesthetic. On the other hand, what is it that drives people into a place? Like, why would you move to a city like Portland? And if they can clean up all the rest of it, which they don't show any signs of doing, then the claim can be, well, at least you're less likely to die here than you were in 2021, right? But what you want is a city that fills you with intrigue, with the impetus to explore, to be surprised around a corner with images of public art. And there is a fair amount of public art, but much of it is defaced. The elk statue got ripped down because elk are racist. It's completely insane.
Well, you mentioned two things that are really opposites that lead to the same result, right? We have a city government that makes excuses for criminals, right? And we saw this throughout the riots.
Yep.
Right? We saw people were not arrested, and on those rare occasions when they were arrested, they were immediately turned back to the city. They had people supplying legal funding. They had a district attorney who refused to prosecute.
Yep.
And so anyway, there's that, and the city allowed the police to be demonized, as you'll see a little later. The idea that all cops are bastards and that, frankly, in Portland, you can spray paint on a wall, kill all cops, and this is taken to be an aesthetic flourish rather than a threat.
Yeah.
All of this results in a city that is increasingly lawless. And you're right, this is an aesthetic violation. But the point is, it's about the fact that we don't punish people. Instead, what we do is we clean up after them. And so
Yes.
go to the next.
And you shouldn't be cleaning up after your 5-year-old when, in order to make a point, he tips over his apple juice, right? It's one thing if there's an accident, but at the point that your 5-year-old looks you in the eye and says, what are you going to do? You teach that 5-year-old that he is going to be responsible for his own actions. Somehow we've got a city of people who apparently were never parents or were such terrible parents that they never understood that actually teaching people to be responsible for their own actions is one of the first roles of a good parent, a good municipal leadership, a good anything, right? You can't do this way. So we're going to need to have this screen be smaller in order to see it.
Scoot that to the right.
Or have us
This is graffiti on a downtown building, a boarded up building, and there are a lot of boarded up buildings in downtown. And the graffiti here, which is actually visually kind of stunning.
The art here is actually impressive.
It's competent. It's 3D.
Yeah, not above. Above is the usual tagging such, but the word on the bottom, which says decolonize, is actually really interestingly done. It's beautifully done, and it's done actually on boarded up windows. So they're not defacing, real property. I mean, it's real property.
Though they would, but
yeah.
But it also, the incoherence of decolonize as a claim. I want to revive a story. We may have talked about it before, but I remember there was some discussion about Latin America and Columbus Day and the offense of Columbus Day. And actually, I do believe that there is reason, of all of the things that we celebrate, there is reason for us to rethink how we celebrate Columbus Day. But the Latin American person who was responding to the idea that Columbus Day was just simply an affront was saying, look, we understand, we in Latin America understand that this is the anniversary of something terrible for us, but it's also our birthday. Mm-hmm. So, here's the thing. You've got Portland, you've got people who would tear it down, who wouldn't know the first thing about what to do if it wasn't here, right? They are simultaneously attacking it and dependent on it. And so the idea of decolonize, well, what does that even mean, right? Careful what you wish for, right?
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, especially in the summer of 2020, we were talking about this a lot, but the people who are the most outraged at the terrible life that they are able to have in the United States, I predict, are the least likely to have been anywhere else, right? And they're also very likely, frankly, to be from the privileged classes. These are the protesters, and the protesters were actually a mix of Portlanders in the summer and fall of 2020. The rioters, who reliably showed up or started doing their rioting after dark for over 100 days straight, represented a much narrower demographic, and it was much more likely to be, white kids, basically upper middle class, well-off white kids, who were, making trouble.
Yeah, they were punks.
They were punks, and my guess is that as interesting as this art is, if this word was something different, we actually drove by this. We were driving and just stopped, parked, didn't just pause, parked to take a picture of this. And again, this is last night, and it's really well done. But the message is incoherent. Decolonize.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I also want to point out something. There's an uncomfortable fact here. The taxes that we pay here in Portland are through the roof, which I don't think, through the roof isn't good. It's not rational policy, but I don't think either one of us would be troubled by high taxes if they were.
We knew that the taxes were high when we moved here.
Right.
And we have always been interested in paying our way and, paying our share for services that are promised in return for what we're paying.
Right. And the idea that what we have is a city government that has actually allowed the police to be so antagonized that the police are now reluctant to respond to 911 calls, it's like you're paying for your own persecution. Yep. Right. And that is a wholly different matter. So, yes, there's a way in which it's odd to find us complaining about taxes. But the point is, taxes are for something. Right. Imagine going to a restaurant where they just give you the bill. There's no meal. You just get the bill. Right.
Do you keep going back?
Or maybe they make you wash dishes and then they give you the bill. Right? That doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense for a city either.